Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you at our June webinar. There's a lot of exciting things to talk about, so we'll go from there. First, to start with, summer starts tomorrow. That's the June solstice. It's the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. And after that, day lengths start to get shorter as we head toward the December solstice. I don't know about you, but that's always the first thing I think about. We're heading toward a date when the Earth is farthest from the sun. So that's coming up, the aphelion, July 3rd. Something to know, the sun isn't in the center of our orbit. So there are times of year when the Earth is closer to the sun, times when they are farther from the sun, and we're heading toward that now. Um, this year, July 3rd, the aphelion, farthest from the sun, that helps us understand things like Earth-Sun geometry. It's always fun to understand how that operates, and that's a huge role in our weather and climate. So now here we'll look at May. Even though most of the counties landed in their top 33% of warm Mays, I think most of us probably enjoyed May this year. May was enjoyable the last couple of years as well, a bit cooler. You can see from all the tide numbers, there's 9 counties that tied with their May temperatures. So you can tell that this has happened before for sure. But let's take a look at that precipitation. And really, for what we could get the first week of May, we had those storms coming into Arizona, bringing that measurable precipitation. And when you're looking at Lake Havasu City getting over an inch of rain when their normal May precipitation is 3/100ths of an inch, the second wettest May for Mojave County was justified. But I do want to kind of bring some context. So we're going to look at the last 12 months, and that's what we're looking at here for the temperatures. Arizona has gone through a really hot past 12 months. From June of last year to May of this year, that was the second hottest June to May on record. Part of that came from last summer. Arizona had the hottest June to August on record. Then Arizona and the Southwest had a record-breaking heat wave last September and October. So both of those months were the hottest on record for Arizona. November cooled off, but then we landed with the hottest December on record. January cooled off, but then brought the second hottest February on record. Let's take a look at that precipitation though, because when we're looking at, I don't know, you remember last June, that tropical storm Alberto popping moisture into Arizona? It's unusual to get tropical moisture in June, and just like this month, but we'll always take whatever precipitation we can get. June is typically the driest month of the year for the state, so anything extra really launches June into the records. And that's what you're seeing last June, the 19th wettest June on record. Then last July to September, that was the 8th driest July to September on record. December and January are statistically the wettest winter months for the state. And unfortunately, this past December to January, that landed as the driest December to January on record. So keeping track of our water supply, we look at a water year, and water years run from October 1st to September 30th. The current status for water year 2025 shows Arizona with the 7th driest October to May on record, only receiving 42% of long-term precipitation amounts. Statistics show that even if we have a productive monsoon season this summer, water year 2025 will likely end as a very dry water year. I wanted to revisit the last couple of Junes with our short-term drought maps. So that's what you're seeing here on this chart. Winter 2023, exceptionally wet, and that really helped Arizona's short-term drought. Even winter 2024 last year was a wetter winter, and that helped moderate short-term drought. When Arizona has a dry summer, followed by a dry fall and a dry winter, short-term drought expands. So gratefully, the wetter May and early June we've just experienced has slightly improved some of Arizona's short-term drought. I do want to invite everyone to participate in some of our really fun things that we do in Arizona with our fun weather communities. The Monsoon Fantasy, please join and see where you land with your forecast. It really does help you understand kind of what's going on in the atmosphere, kind of what we can expect. It's always fun. And then if you can land into central Arizona, every other month we have a great meeting, and we've got one coming up next week. If you want to join us at our Central Arizona AMS meeting, just email centralazams@gmail.com. We'll get you right in, get you all the information. Hope we can see you there. And then also the fun way of looking at things, the monsoon bingo, which I think we can all tag that free space, hot and dry day, absolutely. But hopefully we'll be able to tag a little bit more of that monsoon bingo. And before we get started on our discussion for the monsoon, I do want to invite everyone to the July weather webinar next month. Arizona State Parks will be joining us with some great information about some of these wonderful places to go in the summer. But please let me introduce Mike Crimmins, who's going to give us a great discussion about those things we can expect for the monsoon season. So thanks very much, Mike. I'm going to stop sharing now and let you take over.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invitation. And I am so excited about Monsoon Bingo. That's perfect. I got to make sure I get that card printed out. And thanks for the plug on Monsoon Fantasy too. Yeah, let's all get in there and see what we can do as far as making those predictions. So to make sure we can see, yep, I think the screen's up. So what I thought I'd do today is do some quick North American monsoon basics, try to get us all on the same page. And then I'll transition into a pretty quick review of last summer, just the evolution of last summer. So we have a little bit of context how we can think about maybe how this summer might turn out. And then we'll look at some of the short-term to seasonal predictions. And then I think we'll have plenty of time to have a discussion after that with some questions, because I have a lot of questions, as I do every monsoon here in Arizona. So what I like to do is first start us to think about the winter versus summer weather patterns we have here in the Southwest. Living in the Southwest, I think, is fascinating because I'm a Midwesterner by birth, but I've now lived more than half my life here in Arizona. And in growing up, we in the upper Midwest had mid-latitude weather. Weather came out of the west and then moved to the east, and that happened all year long. And we see this pattern across much of the United States. And in the wintertime, Arizona is part of this mid-latitude weather flow, which is weather coming out of the west with low pressure systems related to that mid-latitude jet stream. And it's a battle between kind of warm, dry air to the south and cool, moist air to the north in that jet stream pattern. And that deviation from that jet stream pattern, which is typically up over the Pacific Northwest in the wintertime, dips through the middle part of the country and would leave the upper Midwest very cold, as I remember. And occasionally we get waves in the jet stream, which would drag that low pressure systems down through the Southwest. And that would be where we would get our precipitation here in Arizona. Strangely, we had this weather pattern in the early part of May, and again, with some very strange weather patterns across the northern hemisphere with some blocking patterns, mid-latitude weather extending all the way into the beginning of June. So that looks like this when we look at atmospheric moisture in the wintertime, see that dry air to the south in these dark red colors. Purples and blues are the moist air. And so in that December through March time period, you can see we're really nestled up against that dry air that is over the East Pacific. And that's really what dominates our weather. We have to have those low pressure systems and that deviation in the weather pattern, mid-latitude weather pattern, to really bring the moisture into it. So we're kind of in that default state of having dry air. And then the monsoon, as we're going to talk about today, is a complete shift. We go from a mid-latitude climate really to a subtropical climate. So that mid-latitude jet stream is going to lift far, far north. It's going to chase the cold air to the north with the sun angle increasing here in the northern hemisphere. We're going to have these large subtropical high pressure systems expand across and near us, and that's actually going to shift the wind flows in the mid levels of the atmosphere from a dry southwesterly flow to hopefully a south southeasterly flow, which will then really introduce an air mass change into Arizona. So that's what this looks like right here, this June through September. You can see that lobe of dry air over the East Pacific lift to the north. And now we're looking to the south for that subtropical moisture, those purples really moving up from the south and into the southwest. Okay, so if we take this a couple steps further here, let's just flip through a couple slides and look at this expansion of the subtropical high pressure system. So remember, in the northern hemisphere, the flow around a high pressure system is clockwise. So in the northern part of these H's, the airflow is from the west moving to the east, and south of it is from east to west. And this gradient in colors is going to give us an indication, basically a gradient of temperatures. And so we're going to induce a jet stream pattern with gradients of temperature. As we move into June, colors get warmer, those H's get closer to us. And as we get into July, you can see the whole northern hemisphere warms up, those high pressure systems expand. And the hope is that those high pressure systems are now up over near us, hopefully not right over top of us, overhead. And that is all the nuances of the monsoon season, is really where these very subtle shifts in this upper level weather pattern are. And what this does is at the surface, this is a graphic looking at climatological lower level atmospheric moisture. And we can kind of think of this as where the air mass boundary is this progression from June 15th, which we just crossed, into July 1st, the green line. And then from July 1st to July 15th, you can see this air mass, if we're on time and climatologically, is going to push up through the low deserts of Arizona. And then by the end of July, that air mass boundary really is kind of sitting at Las Vegas. And if you've ever driven to Las Vegas in the summertime, you know that you will sometimes be in the real sticky air in Phoenix. And by the time you get in Las Vegas, you're going to have that hot, dry air again. And so we're really on that edge of that air mass. And then you get into California and those low deserts too, you can drive right out of that monsoon air mass. So here's a little cartoon graphic to try to put a lot of these pieces together. Upper level high pressure system, we call that the monsoon high pressure system up over the Four Corners. We call it Four Corners High, sometimes colloquially. If we look at the low deserts, it gets so hot there, such a thick lower part of the atmosphere, it induces a low pressure system, which can be real handy in helping draw up Gulf of California moisture. And we're really looking to the south to see where that expansion of the monsoon activity in Mexico is first. And then sometimes we can actually get moisture work its way through the surface and through the passes, even along I-10 from southeast Arizona and into and converging. And that's really what we need, is that moisture sources converging in Arizona. Plenty of heat. We need the fuel, which is the atmospheric moisture. If we look at the climatological progression here, upper left is the long-term monthly average precipitation for June. You can see the high country, the mountains in southeast Arizona have a head start for sure. So we get into July, they light up first. We start to reach into the low deserts climatologically, peak in August, and we're getting as much precip as we usually get in the summertime in the low deserts by the August time period, and then a quick retreat out in September. The storms usually do typically retreat to the high country and out southeast Arizona, and then we're out again by October. And then it puts it together, that total average, very, very strong correlation with topography. The highest areas of Arizona typically get the most frequent storm activity and the most precipitation. As you go downhill, lower elevations, all the way to like someplace like Yuma, very, very little precipitation on average. Okay, so 2024, this is upper left is across the Southwest, what we observed with PRISM climate, gridded climate data, and the lower left is the percent of average precipitation, June 15th through September 30th, 2024. And across Arizona, it was a very interesting monsoon, kind of came in with a bang and then just kind of fizzled. There wasn't a lot after, especially in the central and southern parts of the state, after the kind of the hard onset in late June, and really tailed off and just kind of petered out. Really interesting pattern. Phoenix to Show Low to Safford, we're in this. It's not quite a donut hole because it's not the shape of a donut. It was this kind of y-axis of low precipitation. Tucson got in a couple of storms early on and then later that put us close to average. But overall, it was a pretty poor monsoon. I think most people could agree upon. If we look at that as far as the whole monsoon region, 2024's average precipitation was about 3.05 inches. And it was the 10th driest on record in the 1900 to 2024. And so you can see it was in that dry tercile and was just slightly better than the previous 2023, which was a very poor monsoon as well. And if we looked at the high pressure system, we're going to really come back to this where the subtropical high pressure system was. If you look at it, it looks pretty similar to what you normally see. If we look at the anomaly map here, it wasn't particularly strong or positioned north of us. It was probably a little bit in a southerly displaced position. It was actually expanded out over the East Pacific too, which is this little orange blob over there, which I think was part of the suppression of the East Pacific tropical storm activity and probably didn't help with the easterly waves and suppressed some Gulf surge activity that we probably could have used through the season. And I'm not super sure why this pattern emerged, but it wasn't particularly helpful. And we can look at the moisture then that kind of follows suit. In the lower left here, some unusually dry anomalies. We were kind of close to average, I think, if you averaged out the whole season, but it wasn't the blue colors, which would have been unusually moist air, wasn't really close by at any point. And if we look at the precip here in Phoenix, I know you guys suffered through another terrible monsoon with you had 7 rain events and only 3 were probably of any consequence, and they ended in the 3rd week of August, and that was it. So it was pretty short and not very productive. Tucson did a little bit better. We had that tropical storm that actually was landfalling in Gulf of Mexico came all the way across northern Mexico and into New Mexico and into Arizona. And we got some rain out of that right in the 3rd week of June. Had a couple of good days in the later part of July, but things did really tail off again. And we were pretty much done by the 3rd week of August. I think we got one event later on in the season. Okay, so now shifting gears, looking ahead, we'll look at a couple of different time frames. So we're into the weather forecast zone here. We can look at daily forecasts, and this is out through 7 days. And this isn't the official forecast from the Weather Service. I'm just looking at some model data here. This is the ECMWF, the European model, the Ensemble Prediction System. And this is what we would consider a transition pattern. So there is a trough off the, well, not off the West Coast, it's in the western part of the US. And so we're stuck between this trough and this high over the east. So they're baking out east. But as you can see here in the lower right is this plume of moisture that's coming up out of Mexico and producing rainfall up through New Mexico, up through northern parts of Mexico, and it's just starting to reach into southeast Arizona. And so this looks like an event and a pattern you would see this time of year. So it looks pretty climatological, and I think that's a good sign. If we look at the 8 to 14 day outlook, just on the other side of that, this pattern over here in the left side of the screen, you can see that the high pressure system, that trough is starting to retreat a little bit to the west. The high pressure is starting to lift a little bit more in the southwest, which you'd expect climatologically. And that is then favoring southeast Arizona and New Mexico, which is again where you really see the activity start in June. And then the hope is that it continues to creep up north into the northwest. And so this looks pretty good. And it's nice to see some green on these outlook maps. This is a forecast snapshot. So this is taking that ECMWF ensemble prediction system. This is just one forecast hour out at July 22nd. So this is a very noisy part of the forecast realm, but it's just nice to see what the system averaged out looks like. And the ridge is in a really nice spot. That high pressure system is anchored over the Arizona-New Mexico border. And as you can see south of that, the little flags here with the wind flow pattern we are actually in southeast Arizona is in an easterly flow, and there's a southerly flow across Arizona. So, and on the lower right here is precipitable water. So just a slight lean towards above average moisture plume coming up out of there. So I'll take it. I mean, this looks pretty good. I think it's what you'd expect climatologically for July 2nd. Again, this is 330 hours out in the forecast. a lot could change, but it's nice to see the models at least hinting that they're seeing something climatological. They do drift towards climatology out at these time periods, so it could just be a little bit of a fake out that they're really not sure, and there's just a lot of noise being averaged together. Okay, so let's broaden it out to the season. So it at least right now looks like onset could be about on time. We're already starting to see it come up in our forecast packages when we see the Weather Service issuing some chance of rain across southeast Arizona. This is the National Multi-Model Ensemble, the average up in the upper left. It's a little fuzzy here, but you're going to be looking for any of the browns versus the greens. There's a little hint of below average for July, August, September in the National Multi-Model Ensemble. You can see the members down here that it is a couple of the models are leaning on that, but a couple of the models aren't, so they're canceling each other out. And then, interestingly, the International Multi-Model Ensemble, which is all the European models, which have tend to do a little bit better skill-wise, are just kind of this giant white area here, which is near average. And maybe a little hints of green over northern Mexico. So it really is at the seasonal level, not much to lock onto as far as what we might expect as far as precipitation. And that's exactly what the brand new out today seasonal outlook by the Climate Prediction Centers is equal chances. So equal chances of below, near average, or above average precipitation. It's just a big shrug. So we're not really sure where we're going to land based on forecast information. Okay, so closing thoughts. Precipitation is forecast to progress north into northern Mexico over the next 7 days. I think good sign for progression. The sea surface temps in the Gulf of California are pretty warm, and I think they're going to warm up further, and that's a really good sign as far as Gulf surge moisture. The CPC outlook for Eastern Pacific overall in the season is for below average. So above average gave me a little bit of hope that maybe that would help in the later part of the season. So seeing below average could be that we maybe have some activity early on and then it tails off again in August and then we're dry in September. But again, the uncertainty is really, really high. And I think overall that is the story here, is that we don't have a lot to lock onto. So I think we're really gonna have to take this day by day and week by week as we go through the season. And hopefully we'll have some surprises in the wet direction, and not in a dangerous way, but in just a good dousing of rain across the Southwest. So again, thanks, Aaron. There's Southwest Monsoon Fantasy Forecasts, and Zach Gatto and I do a podcast every month. We'll be talking about the monsoon, and thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Mike. That was awesome and exceptional. Of course, folks, if you have any questions, you can throw those into our chat. I'm really grateful for that. I'm really glad that you brought up the Sea of Cortez. Looking at those sea surface temperatures, they seem a little bit warmer than normal right now. So, what are you thinking? Maybe that'll help contribute a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a good sign, right? And I think that when you have real dominant kind of unsettled weather pattern, trough activity that extends late in the spring, you can often have winds blow from north to south down the Gulf of California, and that will keep the waters unusually cool. But they've warmed up really quick, and so this map right here shows they're 2 to 3 degrees above average. The northern part of the Gulf is still lagging a little bit, but I think that with this ridge we're baking under right now, they'll quickly warm up, and that'll help with that seep of moisture into the state, especially low deserts.
Yeah, absolutely. So grateful for seeing kind of things coming together, fingers crossed, but we are going to have to pay attention, just like you were saying. And I think we all enjoy that with our monsoon season. We do have to kind of keep our eyes on the prize, and I'm grateful for your time. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to go ahead and stop